actual cities like Birmingham that are totally Muslim, where non-Muslims just simply don't go in.
It was pretty scary, and I've been to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kashmir, India, and at times it felt like that, those places in the banlieue and these no-go zones.
The Fox News hysteria over no-go zones for non-Muslims in Britain and France was met with widespread ridicule, both here and across the pond. Paris is a city famous for its food, history, culture, and for its neighborhood-sized mini-caliphate hellscapes run as tiny Islamist extremist fiefdoms, was the assessment by Vox. British Prime Minister David Cameron minced no words and labeled Steve Emerson, Fox's so-called terror expert. He labeled him a complete idiot. And the French equivalent of The Daily Show outfitted its reporters in helmets and in protective gear to venture into the so-called no-go zones of Paris.
On a envoyé notre équipe quadriller les quartiers interdits de la capitale, selon Fox News. Heureusement, ils avaient des casques.
Est-ce qu'on pourrait comparer le quartier à l'Irak ou l'Afghanistan?
Non, du tout.
Est-ce qu'on pourrait comparer ce quartier avec l'Afghanistan ou l'Irak?
Non, pas du tout. On dirait quand même en France. Hein.
The no-go myth appears to have originated in a mistaken interpretation of 750 sensitive neighborhoods in France, which were designated as priority areas for urban renewal and other forms of state aid. Not exactly all Muslim terrorist enclaves governed by Sharia law. All of this prompted Fox to issue a rare on-air correction this Saturday night.
Over the course of this last week, we have made some regrettable errors on air regarding the Muslim population in Europe. This applies especially to discussions of so-called no-go zones, areas where non-Muslims allegedly aren't allowed in and police supposedly won't go. To be clear, there is no formal designation of these zones in either country and no credible information to support the assertion there are specific areas in these countries that exclude individuals based solely on their religion.
No credible information. And yet, almost 2 days later, Louisiana governor and potential presidential candidate Bobby Jindal was in London warning of the dangers of, wait for it, no-go zones.
These so-called no-go zones, I think, is a mistake for any country to allow the development of areas within their country, whether it's neighborhoods or other areas, where the same laws, the same values, the same rules simply don't apply.
Joining me now is senior editor for Islamic Monthly, international human rights lawyer Arsalan Iftikhar. Arsalan, thank you for joining me on this Martin Luther King Day, when we unfortunately have to talk about conservatives fomenting Muslim anti-terror hysteria. Let me ask you first, are you surprised that somehow the debunking of these fake no-go zones has not made its way to the biosphere that Governor Jindal exists in?
Sadly, Alex, no, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, you know, you have Stephen Emerson, who recently, you know, talked about Muslim no-go zones, but people forget that after the Oklahoma City bombing, Stephen Emerson very famously was making the rounds on television saying that we should be looking for Arab Muslim men who committed the Oklahoma City bombing tragedy, when in fact it was a white Christian man named Timothy McVeigh that had done it. And so, you know, Fox News has a long history of, you know, pandering to the lowest common denominator of, you know, anti-Muslim sentiment here in the United States. And so I'm not surprised at all that Governor Jindal has latched onto it stupidly.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, Fox issued an on-air retraction, an apology,
right,
rescinding the sort of contention they had made. Bobby Jindal, not only yesterday, but then again today, was asked by an interviewer about no-go zones and said, I did say so-called no-go zones, and I think that the radical left absolutely wants to pretend like this problem is not here. Pretending it's not here won't make it go away. Somehow this is all the fault of the radical left.
Yeah, you know, I think Governor Jindal is protesting a bit too much. He might be trying to, you know, scrub some of the brown off of his skin as he runs to the right, you know, in a Republican presidential exploratory bid. I think it's the worst, you know, common denominator of American politics to marginalize any minority demographic group. And I'm pretty sure that Governor Jindal will come to his senses, hopefully, in the next couple of days.
Well, I mean, I guess I wonder, you know, when we talked about people coming to their senses, the sort of anti-Islam, Muslim phobia is a very pronounced sentiment in the United States. And a lot of people will say, okay, America, it feels like radical Islam is at war with the United States, it's at war with the West and all of its principles. As a result, some states, I think all but 16 states in this country, have considered passing anti-Sharia laws, which are known as anti-foreign law provisions. They don't specifically call out Sharia. But, that's a dramatic number of states that have tried to pass this. 7 states currently actually do ban foreign law, Sharia law. I mean, when you have a sort of a tidal wave of governance that seizes upon these feelings of fear and the otherization of a vast number of people, I mean, how do you reverse that tide? Especially in the wake of things like Paris. Go ahead.
Yeah, Alex, it actually all comes down to money. I mean, the Center for American Progress a few years ago came out with a report called Fear Incorporated, which showed that the top 5 anti-Muslim activists in the United States receive $42 million per year to push these narratives on Islam and Muslims. The guy, David Yerushalmi, who basically was the mastermind behind the anti-Sharia legislation, is one of those 5 people getting the $42 million that CAP highlighted in their report. And so, when those of us on the left have 1/10 of that budget, if that, it's obviously going to mean that we're going to see right-wing neoconservative meta-narratives about Islam and Muslims in the media airwaves when people like this are getting Koch brothers levels of money.
Let me ask you about the president's comments at the end of last week when he was having a bilateral press conference with Prime Minister David Cameron, and he suggested that one of the reasons the U.S. was to some degree in less of a sort of dangerous spot than Europe in terms of the threat of radicalization and terrorism was because the Americans had absorbed the U.S. Muslim population better, that they were more integrated into American society than Muslims in Europe. What did you think of that? Do you agree with that?
That's actually empirically correct. I mean, if you look at immigration laws over the last 50 years, Europe always had much more relaxed laws, which allowed for guest workers from Muslim countries, the lower class, less educated. Whereas in America here, we always had very strict immigration laws. So we were basically the brain drain from the Muslim world. We were the doctors, we were the engineers. 58% of American Muslims have a graduate degree of some sort. 42% of American Muslims make over $75,000 a year. So amongst the Western diaspora of Muslims, the American Muslim community, we are certainly the most economically and sociopolitically empowered diaspora there is.
Do you feel like this is reversible? I mean, the sort of the fear, and I think what is becoming a sort of deep-seated cultural, anxiety about groups of people who belong to the Muslim faith. I mean, is that reversible in the coming decade?
I think the short answer is no, Alex, to be honest with you. I think that Islam and Muslims will continue to be a political football in the year 2016. We had it during the entire presidency of Barack Obama when people said that Barack Obama was a secret Muslim. That was really their way of saying that Barack Obama was black. That was their way of otherizing him in a way that is, acceptable in American society today. Taking pot shots at Muslims is one accepted form of racism in the U.S. today.
The Islamic Monthly's Arsalan Iftikhar. Thank you for your time, Arsalan.
My pleasure, Alex.
Coming up just in time for MLK Day.